Hi Chris, how are you?
Good evening, Rod. Yeah, here we are. Second time this week. We're recording next week's show early. So if you're listening, we actually recorded this last week for this week.
That makes some sort of sense. I feel like I'm time travelling a little bit, but yeah, I get you.
I'm quite pleased with my effort there. Anyway, today is the 16th of May. So if we've missed any Monday news, it's because we're recording a little bit earlier on the Thursday. It's episode 121. And I think we're going to jump straight into some follow-up, unless we want to talk about the muggy weather, but it's not very exciting.
We do. It's tradition to talk about the weather. It's a little bit here and there, isn't it? I was disturbed today by the amount of aircraft flying around overhead. I was beginning to worry we'd gone to war and nobody had told me.
I wouldn't know because I live near two military bases, so it's just normal for me at the moment, I think.
It's very unusual for me.
But one of the military bases I live by, considering there's a reasonable amount of aircraft, every time you drive past, you see nothing. There is no aircraft parked up. They've got some hangars, obviously, but it just strikes me as odd because there's nothing to see until one comes into land or take off.
Yeah, I'd quite like that. I used to be quite a plane geek when I was younger, and of course I'm flying on Saturday, so it's I'm less plane geeky than I used to be. That's for sure.
A friend of mine, his son, for his 13th birthday, wanted just to go to Heathrow with his Nikon and his big lens and take photos of airplanes. So there you go. It's still alive.
Oh, it's cooler than plane spotting.
Yeah, I would probably. I don't know. I don't really do either, but I'm sure if whatever you're into, you enjoy it, don't you? So I don't know. I'd rather go car spotting.
I guess as a plane spotter these days, you could look for bits falling off a Boeing aircraft anyway. So
yes, quite possibly, and you get the app, don't you? So you can see all the planes above your head, which is kind of cool. So you know what's coming in and stuff.
Yeah, there's a potential app of the week there. I'm glad you reminded me of that. Should we go and do some follow-up?
Let's do it. So we're going to dive straight in with, are we in Apple's post-iPad era? Now, for the listeners that haven't heard of it, there was talk a long time ago, was it post-iPhone era, I think it was, or post-Mac era? I can't remember now what the saying
Post-Mac.
was. Post-Mac era. And we were for a little while in this post-Mac era where people were saying, well, we're not going to, Apple aren't going to develop the Mac anymore, and they see the iPad as their future. And obviously that never came to fruition. And then at some point they went, hang on a minute, we should carry on with the Mac and we can have all our platforms, and which they've kind of done. And we're going to talk a bit about the iPad in a minute. But that's what that was around. Are we in a post-Mac era where everybody's using their phone as a primary computer and the iPad's going to take over? And obviously we never really got that. The Mac, I think, has had a little bit of a renaissance, wouldn't you say?
I think the Mac's had a major renaissance. As you say, we will talk about this later, so I don't know how much I want to get into it. I just think it's an interesting post by Dan Moren, that's timely. You will give us your review of your iPad, which well done for getting so quickly. I mean, fair play Apple and fair play you for being able to give us a review so quickly. Again, and this isn't a surprise, we talked about it last week, the software's not great, the hardware is truly amazing, and this is a conscious decision by Apple to have it in this place, more than anything. They don't want it to be a Mac. They don't want Macs to have cellular because it cross-cuts across this. They don't want Macs to have touchscreen because iPads have touchscreen. That's a decision. We've had touchscreens on Windows computers must be getting on for at least 10 years now, probably longer.
Yeah, no, we definitely have on Windows. Interestingly, in the corporation where I work, we had a load of touchscreens, 6-7 years ago. People loved them, but then we found actually people aren't really using them, so we stopped buying them and went back to traditional laptops. It's super interesting that actually people are quite comfortable just with that laptop format, and I guess because people have had it for so long.
Anyway, this is an interesting thing, and it's worth a read. Dan's always quite a thoughtful writer, and this is him writing from Macworld. But I'm amused by the patent diagram he's got halfway down the article about a recent patent filed by Apple showed the company is working on a touchscreen MacBook with a detachable display. Well, isn't that what Federico made a couple of weeks back, frankly?
Yeah, he's made one of them. It'll be interesting whether they do this, but that just looks like the iPad to me.
Totally. I mean, that's the device you've got newly in the post this week and has been like that since the smart keyboard came along. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Federico had a post about the shortcomings of iPad, and he said, actually, I don't want them just to bring all the Mac stuff to the iPad exactly as the Mac is. I want them to do it in the iPad way, because he's a bit like me. I actually quite enjoy using iPads and the OS, but I don't want it to do everything the Mac does, but I think it needs to do more than what it does now. But if you're going to add new functionality, don't just lift and shift it, bring it for a touch-first tablet world that can have a keyboard and mouse.
Yeah. let's save it for the main show anyway.
Done.
Although, immediately we're into the second article, which is just sort of backing up what we said a minute ago. It's an article in 9 to 5 Mac. Apple says the majority of Mac users also own an iPad, which is probably one of the real reasons for not moving things is they get the money out of you twice. If they made Mac OS on an iPad and it did everything you ever wanted it to do, then why would you buy a Mac as well?
I think that's going to be diminishing though over time as people stop using their iPads like you as much. Now the Mac has had its renaissance as we discussed, and you can do more with it. That actually, I think that's a false way of looking at it because it won't last for very long.
I agree. So next story is two stories. In fact, the second big marketplace has come to the EU. This is called Setapp. Setapp was already an established brand, I want to say, on the Mac, where you pay a monthly subscription. It's not a lot, I don't think. I think it's $9.99 a month, and they continually add apps to it, and it's a great way of trying out things that you think you might like, and there's some really sort of good, well-made apps in there as well that you just get as part of the subscription. So think of it as like an Xbox Games Pass for Mac apps. It's there, you download things, you can get on and use it. So they've brought something like that to iOS. Some of these apps are already existing within the App Store. Some of them aren't. There's nothing as far-reaching at the moment for Setapp that I can see as the Clipboard app is on Alt Store. But I think this is just good. They're sort of continually adding to it. And I think there's 13 apps at launch, and they've already added 2 more or something like that. So you can see this building to be something beyond, what they've started with. This is positive.
No, I think this is good. The more marketplaces, app stores, the better. I'm really curious to see what they do in iOS 18. Are they going to announce it coming to more territories? I wonder if this is a test, but I don't know. And will they have enough data to do that? I don't know. But I'm super curious to see, will Apple get in front of regulation, or will they still stick to adhering to it when they're forced to?
Yeah, it's not been their pattern up till now, has it? It's very much a rod, not a carrot, that sort of drives Apple at the moment as much as I think.
Carrot and stick, dude.
Carrot and stick, yeah. Well, my brain's gone. It's been that kind of day, but you got what I meant.
Yeah, no, and I think this looks really good. And I think Microsoft are bringing theirs at some point. But it's going to be more of a web app store than a app that you install and then have a store on it, if that makes sense. That's what I was reading.
It is interesting as you scroll through the article on The Verge and you see all the steps you've got to go through, which we've reported on before, that this is not a straightforward process. You've really got to opt into doing this. But it's obviously possible, and people are getting on and using it, and I think it's good that they have, EU users at least, have more choice. Yeah, good. Well done. Applause all around.
I wonder if it will change over time and become less egregious as people get used to it. Maybe Apple are right to do it in the first instance. Let's just be cautious. This is new. And then over time, I don't know. They may get forced to change it.
Yeah, I did, and I should have linked to the article. I've lost it in one of my many newsreaders, as we know, somewhere about a user deleting one of the app stores. If you want to reinstall an EU app store after a marketplace, not app store, after you delete it, it's apparently almost impossible to do so. So there's some customization Apple need to do there too.
Yeah, I would imagine it will improve, like I say, as life goes on. Moving on, then we've got VMware Fusion in here, I see, and you can now get a free version for personal consumption.
Yeah, this is interesting. A lot of reporting on Broadcom. Is it Broadcom? Broadcom, not Qualcomm. Broadcom, who bought VMware. And then immediately started hiking the prices up on most customers, have released VMware Fusion Pro 13 for some reason for personal use. So this used to be an app you'd have to pay for. It was about 50 quid, possibly a little bit more. Did you buy this or Parallels? I can't remember.
I've had both at various times, I think, to play with when I used to use Windows on an Intel Mac circa 10 years ago. I've not used this one recently because I haven't got that need, but I think it's great. Like, free software for everybody. Fantastic.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. This is good. I'm slightly nervous about Broadcom doing anything. I mean, is this just they're trying to throw some chaff out so people will not judge them so harshly for what they're doing in the enterprise? Oh, look, we give stuff away free too. We're not just evil all the time. Because if you're any sort of enterprise customer, a single instance of being able to run a VM on a Mac's not much good to anybody. But it is good for Mac users, so that's great. It's probably going to upset Parallels somewhat because they make a product similar to this that has similar, features of parity anyway that VMware are now giving away for free. I think as ARM on Windows continues to improve, maybe there'll be more reasons to run, the ARM version of Windows. If, say, for example, some more games start to come to ARM Windows that Mac users may want to play, and we know that the speed of ARM on Windows has been faster on Mac hardware than it has been on the pre-release version of Windows things. So there could well be reasons for grabbing this while it's free, because who knows, Broadcom could take it away in 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's my only concern. They've already abandoned a load of free things that they acquired through VMware, so it'd be interesting. Maybe they're just trying it. And like you say, some good PR.
Yeah, my take on this is you should download the open source thing UTM, which is based on QEMU, and it's almost as good as this. It doesn't have a couple of the bells and whistles like the integration that you get with VMware and Parallels, where you can run Windows apps as Mac Windows effectively and isolate them from the desktop environment which they're running in, which looks really cool, even though they're still running on it. But yeah, it's good. It's free. So it's a public service announcement as much as anything, that if you've been itching to do a bit of virtualization on your Mac, this is not a bad way to do it, but just be careful of the license.
Agreed.
Moving on.
So next up, we've got macOS 14.5, which is the latest update. It came out last week in the iOS 17.5 train. Last Monday, actually, in fact, as we recorded the previous show.
Yeah, it was. And there's been a couple of bits about this, and we've got another story about it in games, actually, just to bring it up. There's been apparently an outstanding issue in macOS 14, which is Sonoma, where if you've got File Vault enabled as well, occasionally it asks you to regenerate your File Vault recovery keys, which seems wrong, because that feels like a security risk waiting to happen. And also, why? Why are they suddenly asking you to regenerate? So you've got a level of encryption anyway with your Mac built into it, because you've got the secure enclave that your hard disk's SSDs sit within. And then if you put File Vault on as well, it encrypts it further. So you've got a couple of levels of encryption. Why are Apple ever asking you to regenerate your File Vault recovery keys? So this just seems like a really weird, interesting thing that's going on, that you could potentially lose all your data as a consequence of these kinds of things when it's regenerating file keys. So it's just something to keep an eye on as much as anything else.
It feels a bit like Apple lately. They have a security thing, they downplay it, and maybe there's something going on underneath that they haven't told us about, and we're unaware of. So that would be my guess, but it's still not handled great.
No, and this quote, macOS is straight up rotting. It is absolutely nuts that the File Vault key regeneration thing has gone unaddressed for a year. This isn't about Apple News being a joke or drag and drop not working anymore. This is a potentially catastrophic data loss bug that Apple has just decided is the new normal. You don't like to read paragraphs like that.
No, it's not good, is it? But yeah, I don't know. I think the problem Apple have is they've got so many platforms now and nuances that, if you're writing one app, you've got to write it for a watch, a phone, an iPad, a Mac, a Vision Pro.
Yeah. Up to a point, they're a $3 trillion company. Sony managed to put out 15 different digital cameras with software and PlayStations and televisions and all this kind of stuff. It's not a good enough excuse, frankly, for me, for a company of this size and this scale that has grown the way that it has, that has such tight control over all of its platforms. You can't tell me they haven't got the resources to do it.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I get frustrated with it because you look at some of the apps on your phone, like the phone app, it's barely changed and adopted any of the newness because it feels like there's nobody there to update the favourite screen or do anything with it anymore. And it is a concern because it's still called an iPhone, but yet the phone app gets the least love every year.
Yeah, every year. Moving on to a product that Apple also, at the moment, doesn't care an awful lot about, and the Vision Pro might be coming out internationally following WWDC. Is this a surprise?
There was talk it was going to be pre. Obviously, I think now we're so close, it makes sense it would be post. I just want to go and have a go on one. And I just want to nip to an Apple store. I say nip, they're a long way away from me. And just try it out. So I'm hoping this is true and I'm hoping it comes to the UK. But I'd love to see what it's like. I'm curious to see what they're going to do and the messaging at WWDC. If they're in their 2-hour slot, they seem to have a lot to cram in.
It is interesting. I saw a thing recently about representatives from worldwide Apple stores being asked to go to Cupertino to get training on doing the Apple Vision Pro, which is what we saw in the run-up to its release in America as well. Selected representatives from the bigger stores were being asked to go where they'd be holding them so they'd be able to run the demos. So yay, that's great. Singapore, all manner of countries that were on there, the French, others. But who weren't on there were Canada and the United Kingdom.
Yeah, so I saw that. What's going on there?
Well, presumably some of those might have been part of the first wave and they're just ready for it, or because they're English speaking as well, it's not a problem, but it seems a bit odd.
I agreed it seems odd. Do you not find it ironic, though, that you're literally shipping people around the world to go for training when you could send them the Vision Pro that they're going to get anyway, pop it on and do the training virtually? Like, surely that's what this is designed for, or one of the use cases. It just seems mad to me that we're physically sending these people to go and have this training in person when they're trying to sell a solution about not being in person.
That's a very acute observation, and they could have a FaceTime call beforehand to tell them how to put it on their heads as well.
Yeah, I just find it really interesting. Or maybe ship it and get some feedback. What was your first run experience like? Did we explain enough? Was it easy to set up? I don't know. I find it super interesting, though.
Problematic. Anyway, I guess we'll see post WWDC.
Should we dive into the news then?
Let's dive head first into the news. Do you want to tell us about this horrible iOS bug that's popped up?
Yeah, this perhaps in hindsight should have been a follow-up because it's a bug that I think we've spoken about before, but apparently since the 17.5 updates come out, if you've previously deleted a photo, it may reappear back in your album or your roll, as they sometimes used to call it. Not good, is it? How's it come back? We feel like we've regressed, and I do understand it. We do get it in software, but not a good look for Apple at all.
This is actually terrifying in the sense that there's lots of photos that people may not want on their phones again. They'll delete them for whatever reason. I'm not going to go into the reasons people may have photos that people don't want to see, but we can all imagine them fairly simply. Deleting them years ago, even as far back as 2010, apparently, they're reappearing. So this to me is a problem for Apple, who say they're the most secure platform, nobody gets to see your data. Even things you've deleted 10 or 11 years ago are popping back into your recently taken photos when they claim to have securely deleted them. This is a serious issue.
It's not good, is it? Because when you move something to the trash or bin, as we have here in the United Kingdom, in photos, it says it will be there for 30 days and you can reclaim it if you want, but then it automatically gets purged. So it feels actually like this could be a GDPR issue in that you're doing something and you as a user doing something, you're invoking a delete. Apple have said, yeah, it will be completely expunged, but it's actually coming back. It's not good. It's really not good. What are they doing? And how much space are they consuming with all this? Maybe it's how they keep their iCloud billing up by making users take up more space than they're actually using.
Well, for users who've only got the 5 gigs and they're making use of that, they'll have well gone past that, and suddenly these photographs are reappearing. And let's be clear about this. This isn't widespread, but there's enough of it being reported on that it's clearly an issue. So, Apple, you can't keep ignoring stuff like this. They need to own up to these problems and deal with them. Like you say, if this could go on to become a GDPR issue because secure things they think they've deleted, or I don't know, devices that consent has been withdrawn for people to be in photographs for corporate stuff or something like that. You can imagine all sorts of scenarios where this could be embarrassing, dangerous, and illegal. So,
I'm relatively calm about it because I'm not that fussed about my photos, but I'm not like everybody else, I think. So there will be people that this could be a major problem for.
Absolutely. So, yeah, this not good. Not good is the understatement. So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on this story, I think.
Yeah, well, that's if Apple ever acknowledge it.
Well, considering they didn't acknowledge the iCloud reset password on your devices thing from a couple of weeks ago, they're not going to talk about WWDC. It's only positive stuff happens at WWDC, nothing negative.
Agreed.
Talking about positive things for Apple, they're apparently now on track for a quarter of all iPhones to be made in India by 2028. On one level, yay, they're diversifying out of China. On another, still 4 years away, I count it, and they're still only up to a quarter of devices.
Yeah, it's a very slow-moving train, this one. And where else do they manufacture them? Because you've got India and China. They'd make them in Brazil as well?
They might make them in Brazil. I think they make them in Indonesia somewhere too.
It's interesting. They really need to spread this around. I'm amazed they let it get so bad that they were so reliant upon one country for so long.
But this is where Cook made his name, isn't it? He was an operations guy that could go to China and get things done.
Yeah, that is true, isn't it, I guess? But bonkers.
Although, if we watched the BlackBerry movie, Mike Lazaridis did not agree.
Yeah, well, he also got stuff done. That BlackBerry movie, again, everybody should go watch it now. Pause the podcast. It's so good.
Never tell people to go away. Well, as soon as you're finished the podcast or watching us on YouTube.
No, this film's so good. It's worth it. And I didn't even own a BlackBerry.
I did. Moving on. This week, Apple has Apple Accessibility Week. They did this last year as well, where they added the ability, for example, to take a picture of something or turn on your iPhone camera near something and it would read out what was going on in the picture for partially sighted people. They've added a few more things to this now. There's more things in speech. There's additional stuff in CarPlay and for the Vision Pro. And for the Vision Pro specifically, it will continuously give you, like I was talking about when I was using the Android phone for the month, it will give you a continuous readout of what's going on around you in text for being spoken. Apparently there's going to be a way to use your gaze to navigate around the iPhone interface. And we said last year when they did this, it's laudable, it's great. They do more for accessibility on devices than just about any other manufacturer, and fair play Apple. We can still give them the credit when credit is due. But B, they're shifting a load of this stuff out of the OS so they can make just announcements about the new stuff within what happens at WWDC.
Well, I think it makes sense. It was International Accessibility Day. They announced it then. And they've got too much to talk about, I think, at WWDC. So I think this does make sense. And it gives it its own, room to breathe and have its story around it. So I think this is good. They should do more little and often rather than just massive events where there's too much to take on board.
I got one thing I want to pick up on about the CarPlay feature. So 3 years ago, I want to say, they brought in the ability for iOS to recognize doorbells and dogs barking, and it would come up on your phone if it thought it heard a dog barking or a doorbell going. They're bringing something like this to CarPlay, that it maybe can hear a siren when you're out and about. What's that about? Surely you should hear the siren anyway.
Well, I guess if you're hard of hearing, maybe you need the alert. Whenever Siri invokes in my BMW, though, through CarPlay, it crashes the CarPlay app in BMW. So I hope this isn't involving that, because otherwise I'll be in a permanent crash state.
Yeah, it will crash a lot. But also, should you be looking at your screen driving along all the time to get something like this? And a little notification at the bottom ain't going to cut it. So if it's important and you indicate that you are hard of hearing or you're deaf or whatever your disability may be, then it needs a different modality. Surely it needs to flash the whole screen or something at you in order to draw your attention to it, rather than just a little pop up at the bottom.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe CarPlay's going to get updated this year, because it hasn't been updated in donkey's years, and maybe they will do something like that. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, but I don't disagree with you. It's a balance, isn't it? Because you don't necessarily want to sidetrack the person from driving, but equally you want to make them aware of the alert. So it's, yeah.
Because the blue flashing lights won't do that. And then the second part of this, which comes to the iPhone as well, is apparently when you're in a car, it will add dots to the screen of the device you're looking at in an effort to reduce motion sickness while driving. So the passenger, for example, won't feel motion sickness when they're looking down at the phone.
I'm somebody that cannot look down while I'm driving. I'm not sure adding 6 dots to the screen is going to cut it for me, but I'm super curious whether it makes a difference.
You're not on your phone while you're driving, are you, Chris?
No, sorry, I meant while I'm a passenger. Sorry, apologies. So I often drive most places because I prefer to be a driver than a passenger, just because of motion sickness.
I get it. I can't do the back. I'm all right as a passenger in the front, but I don't like sitting in the back for any length of time.
Agreed. So I'm curious where that's going to do it. I was with somebody the other day and they could use their phone in the car fine. I was like, I don't know how you do that.
Next story, we talked about Dell leaking customer data just on Monday. Now Dell are leaking Windows stuff about the next generation ARM chips, which we talked about at the top of the show, for virtualizing them, but obviously Dell are a major manufacturer for these kinds of things. There's been a huge 311-page leak spilling Dell's plans for its next generation XPS, maybe with some NVIDIA stuff in there as well. And they're talking about 29-hour battery life on laptops, on these Windows ARM laptops. That's impressive.
That's a bit upsetting for the person who just bought a 10-hour iPad.
Even my MacBook Pro 15.
Yeah, it's bonkers, isn't it? It's not a good look for Dell, though, is it?
They're very leaky. They're a bit like a ship with a hole below the waterline, aren't they?
They are. They make some good hardware, to be fair, at all price points, but they are, not good for them.
No, and it is interesting. The XPS has become a quite well-respected line of laptops. It's very close looks-wise to me to MacBook Pros. It's got its own sort of distinct spin on it. There's some interesting hardware in the Windows world, and I think Dell have always been quite experimental. You can buy a Linux laptop directly off Dell, for example, and not many manufacturers offer that kind of stuff. Always made great server hardware. Some of their workstations are a little bit questionable. I remember some really dodgy motherboards back in the day where the capacitors would just blow up on them randomly. But those days are past them mostly, I think, and the XPS is a good range of laptops if you're into that kind of thing. But 29-hour battery life, that might make some Mac users pay attention.
Agreed. And you're right, they do make some fantastic equipment. So I'm super curious on it. And like I say, question the debate Apple had around the 10-hour battery life of the iPad.
Yeah, I think they came out on the wrong side of that. Add another, tenth of an inch to it, and how much longer could the battery have been?
Agreed. Yeah, they should have done something there.
They've just decided 10 hours is enough. Moving on, again, the phrase that pays. It's Android beta season. I talked about it when I was trying out my Android phone, that it was still stuck on the previous 14 beta before I managed to fix it. I then fixed and it offered to go up to the 15 beta. 15 beta 2 has been released and has a really cool feature that, based on the motion of the accelerometer inside of the device, if it thinks it's being stolen or whipped out your hand suddenly, or there's a sudden change in velocity, it will immediately lock the phone. That's a good idea.
So every time you drop it on a concrete floor, it will lock. But no, it does seem a good idea, because if it's moving at a crazy fast motion, chances are it's abnormal activity, and therefore kind of makes sense.
But wouldn't you want it to lock when it was heading towards the concrete anyway? Because if you're looking at your embarrassing photo that's just returned off iCloud,
Yep.
and somebody helpful picks it up for you, you kind of want to lock anyway.
I know, I agree. I think it's fine. I think it sounds like, actually, in hindsight, a pretty simple feature for somebody to implement. So, 2 thumbs up.
Do you think there's somebody at Apple just prior to WWDC going, damn it, and quickly coding that into the next version of iOS?
Yeah, coming in beta 4 of iOS 18. It does seem like a good feature, like I say, and you've got all the hardware to do it, so it seems like a no-brainer.
You do. Moving on, story in TechCrunch. Apparently a company called Permira is taking Squarespace private in a $6.9 billion deal. This isn't something typically we'd report on, other than the fact that the Wake From Sleep website runs on Squarespace. Squarespace sponsor lots of podcasts. Anybody listens to not ours. Squarespace, we're still available. But this is interesting. Squarespace is being taken private by a UK-based private equity firm for quite a lot of money. What did you think of this story?
I didn't see it coming, but it is interesting. I quite like this British company, makes a nice change. Squarespace, fantastic product. I mean, it's sponsored trillions of podcasts. It is a good product. Takes a little while just to get used to the interface. But then I'm used to being a web developer. But I didn't see this coming. It's odd for a UK company to take an American company private, but I think probably makes a lot of sense. Super interesting.
It's a really good platform, I think, if you're just trying to build a generic website to do something, and the templating and things that come with it is simple enough that most non-technical users can get on and build something, which is, to its credit, I've started websites in Squarespace and then given them to other people to continue, and they're at such a point that you just go, type that in there, move that there, and you can see what you're doing and they can get on and do it. I think this is a reaction to WordPress taking over most of the market for sort of personalized blogs and things like that there's only WordPress and possibly Squarespace sort of on the content management side that are relatively easy to get up and running with and have enough cachet with developers and the public alike to be able to do it. So it might be a sensible investment. As AI and everything begins to change the face of the web, then the value of these kinds of things I might question a little bit, but I think this is a sensible way to go. It's certainly a clever investment, potentially.
It's a big investment, though, isn't it? You've got to sell a lot of websites to cover your 6.9 billion deal, but maybe they've got an AI plan that's going to continue to launch them into the stratosphere. So, or is AI just going to come along and take their lunch? So it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
Well, we'll talk about that in the main show. We've got some Google news to go through this week as well. Speaking of one of Google's competitors, and more likely at this point one of Microsoft's competitors, Meta had a Teams competitor called Workplace. Did you know about this?
Yeah, who knew? I didn't know this was the thing.
Everybody had they copied Slack with Teams, and then Meta copied Teams with their Workplace thing. So why would you want your work stuff to go through Meta?
Maybe they wrote this for themselves and they thought the world was going to move to them. I think this is too hard, though. Once people have got their thing, they don't then want another thing. So I'm not surprised it's closing down. I'm probably more surprised it existed. In some ways, I'm surprised they're not keeping it around just for themselves, because surely run your own work through it, but then I guess there's an overhead to maintain it.
Yeah, there is. It's a bit of an odd thing, and it's table stakes these days. A bit of chat, a bit of keep this running, and all the rest of it. And why would you? And genuinely, if you're a corporation or a public sector enterprise or something like that, you're not going to trust Meta with any of your data.
Maybe Meta don't even trust themselves. That's why they're coming off it, so they don't leak their board meetings. Yeah, they've got the name in the consumer space. They've not got the name in the corporate space, unless it's WhatsApp, which people seem to forget is a Meta product.
Yeah, that is true. It's it's two-factor encrypted though, which means Meta only get a little bit, like your contact data when you launch it or something like that. But and maybe who you're talking to, but about what not. So I think it already had that pre-existing trust as a brand before Meta got their hands on it, and its momentum has just kept going. But I would never have used a Meta Workplace app, and I can't think of many that would.
I completely agree.
Next story, and probably our last story for the news, unless I've missed something, is that Apple looks set to lose its latest court battle with Epic Games. So we've talked about this before. There's been ongoing court battles, and I'm pretty sure we reported on this story as more or less being a win for Apple. There was about 7 or 8 different features to the court, and the judge sided with Apple on every one, except about in-app payments and the flagging of where payments should go. The judge is apparently very upset that Apple haven't actually done anything about that one part of the settlement that was made against them, in the same way that they haven't got on with Spotify by giving updates and things to the app at this point. So this is poor Apple at a time when the Department of Justice is suing you, when you've got all this interest about the DMA, when you've got other things going on in the UK and other countries around this with developers suing you. And the court case you won, that you sort of crow about, this is happening. This is poor.
Yeah, and the link we've got actually gives the story so far, but it's not a good look for Apple. And like I say, are they going to turn around and go, all right, you can all have everything that we've announced in the EU, we're going to do it worldwide, job done, everybody leave us alone? But I don't know. I'm super curious to see how Apple are going to play it. At some point, they need to get in front of it and not be behind it.
I mean, the fundamental part of this is the court told Apple it must allow app sales outside of the App Store, and then Apple have just not shifted on that.
Where do you stand with that, though? It's like, I don't know. If you've been told in a court of law you've got to do something, surely you have to get on and do it?
I got this picture of them all, let's work on some lovely hardware, we'll tweak the software a bit, and then they stand around with their fingers in their ears spending their money.
Yeah, quite possibly.
The Scrooge McDuck, they go diving in their pool of shares, but God, I don't understand their approach to this at all.
No, it's very odd, isn't it? Not a good look.
I think that's the fastest news section we've done in quite some time.
I concur. I think it is actually. We rattled through it. Maybe sort of 10 links is a good thing for us to whittle down to. Depends what's happening that week.
Well, it could be a busy week. We might not have a lot to talk about in the main show. Do you want to do some media instead, though?
Media instead. So what have we got here? We've got publishers send cease and desist to Spotify over unlicensed content. So I'm not a Spotify user. Are you?
Not anymore.
Okay, but you have been.
I have been in the past, yeah. So and I've reported before, I think, that their algorithm for identifying the kind of music you want to listen to is far superior to what Apple gives you.
I think Apple's has improved for me, but it used to annoy me every now and again. Like, you'd go to new albums on the home screen and it would show me something, and then I'd go into the general browse section for the masses, and I'd be like, there's a brand new album out from an artist I've got in my library. Why didn't you show me that on the For You screen? Do you know? And that's why I used to get frustrated with it, but it's definitely got better for me over time. I'm not saying it's perfect under any estimation, but no, we should probably get back to the Spotify news.
I'm going to finish with the thought that better than rubbish isn't hard. If you just get 1% better, it's easy to show an improvement. This particular story, which comes from Rolling Stone, is apparently that Spotify is hosting content in terms of lyrics, podcasts, or music videos on the Spotify platform without actually having the rights to do so. We've reported before on Spotify, not paying artists sufficient amount of money for the amount of streaming that they do, significantly less than the other streaming platforms. And this is kind of another knock against them. And I'm conscious we tend to report for Spotify a lot of the time in the sort of battles with Apple, but the company is not perfect and has their own issues. And this sort of highlights quite well one of them.
Yeah, they have got their issues, and it must be constant, but I don't know. I expected more of Spotify because they like to have the moral high ground. That's certainly how they portray themselves. And I guess Apple are also a bit like that sometimes in other ways. But as we know, they're not always got the moral high ground. So, yeah, it is what it is, I guess. But, yeah, not good for Spotify.
It is, and it's interesting. This isn't coming from a tech website. This is coming from a media entertainment focused website, which is what Rolling Stone is. And lots of people use Spotify. I would say, if I were to, just sense the wind, which way the wind was blowing, more people use Spotify than Apple Music. Even most, I would say, Apple customers use Spotify more than Apple Music. So it's something to be aware of, that they'd need to be eating their own dog food, or whatever the correct expression is, for them to do it. If they're going to have the moral high ground, then they actually need to walk the walk.
I agree with you on both points. I do think Spotify is more widely used than Apple Music.
Yeah. Speaking of something Apple Music has got very right, though, and I don't know if you've been paying attention to this, is that in the last 4 days, they've started to talk about having the 100 best albums of all time. So I'm a big music fan. I'm an Apple Music subscriber. I saw this announced and then forgot about it. And then by accident, although it's quite hard to slightly by accident because it's everywhere on Apple Music at the moment, I clicked on one of Zane Lowe's radio shows introducing the first 10 albums in the top 100 list. What a fantastic job Zane Lowe and Apple Music are doing in introducing these albums. I'd say it's about a 40-minute show. It's going to be split every day. They release another 10 with the top 100 list. I've listened to 2 days worth now, and I'm just super impressed. With the choice of albums they've got. They've made me listen to things I haven't listened to in a long time. They've made me listen to things that I would never have sort of consciously chosen to seek out and find. For a top 100 list, it's got things from 2022 in there. It's got things from 2018 in there. Artists that would be considered country. They're not, albums from the 60s and 70s, not just bang up to date stuff, not all stuff from the 80s or 90s, whatever sort of classic areas of music would be. It's a really good list. It's super well presented. And I'm blown away generally. I've got one complaint, but I'll let you talk about it as well. Have you tried any of these?
I've got 3 complaints, but equally, I think the concept behind it, fantastic. Like, here's the 100 best albums, and like you say, I'm looking at it now. I've got Massive Attack, AC/DC, and Nina Simone. Like, what a selection of artists there. Now, actually, ones I all quite like, and then there's loads of other stuff. it's covering everything. R&B and what have you, and I think it's really good. So love it. But what I don't like is you find it in the music app on your iPhone, which is probably how most people listen to it. It then pops you to a website. And here in the UK, it pops you to a website and goes, do you want to go to our UK version of Apple Music? You go, okay. And it goes, do you want to sign in? And I'm like, well, I've just been in the app. I think the experience is rubbish. But once you're in, it's fantastic. But why is it just not part of the music app? They write all the apps. I don't get it.
So you've hit the nail on the head. That was about to be my complaint, is that finding the radio shows is one thing, but the icon on the app, and be it on the Mac or be it on the phone, it drops you into a website. I don't want a website. I want you to take me. Give me a playlist of all the albums that have been released so far and add in the next 10 albums, not songs, but the albums, so I can view them like that as they're released. If I'm interested in this, that's what I want to be able to do. They're doing such a good job of highlighting the albums and the thoughtful choice that's gone behind them, and they're even interviewing some of the artists and judges on the panel that have brought it to the fore. And that bit's great, but it falls apart the second you actually think, no, I want to listen to that one. And it kicks you out to this website.
Or come up with a mechanism to display more content in the app, because you're going to do more of this. It's the same with the replay every year. That bounces out to a website. And maybe we're going more for the web, but just make it a nicer experience, because it just feels a little janky.
Yeah, so I'd thoroughly recommend anybody who's got an Apple Music subscription, and I suspect most people don't go anywhere near the radio tabs. They find the albums they want to hear, and then they get on and do it. Seek out these shows. There's 2 shows. It's a continuous sort of rolling loop of the 10 songs of the day, where they play 4 or 5 tracks from the album as they go through it. So they don't play the entire album, but they'll say, pick up Erykah Badu that's in the next top 10. And they'll play the 3 or 4 top tracks off Erykah Badu's, and then they'll move on to Tupac, and then they'll move on to Sade. And that's the way they do it. And then on the other side of it is Zane Lowe and his guest of the moment running through why those albums got picked and what their sort of top tracks on them are. And genuinely, if you've got 40 minutes, it's worth streaming. Let the previous days happen and then listen to it. I have listened to albums I would not have listened to. The number 100 album by Robin, Body Talk, is an absolutely terrific piece of pop that I would never have listened to otherwise. So give it a go.
Yes, boss. I will take a look at it. I do think it's a cool idea. Like I say, it's just a shame, I think, the implementation detail of it, but it is what it is.
Isn't it nice to talk about some music in the media section, though?
Agreed. We should do more ranging media than just movie-based media.
We should. A third Downton movie is happening.
I just popped this in. So just before the podcast, I was reading a thing that they've started filming at Highclere Castle for the third Downton movie. I got quite into Downton Abbey about a year ago. I watched all the seasons and all the movies, largely in back-to-back order, and just generally quite enjoyed that world. I like Hugh Bonneville. He's fantastic. So I just thought I'd pop that in there. We used to talk a little bit more about what's up and coming, and I just saw that one and thought that was interesting.
Maybe we've got an audience of hardcore Downton fans and you've just rocked the world.
Everybody likes Downton.
I'm okay with Downton. I wasn't very interested in the early seasons, but I sort of fell into it as it went on.
I think it was all right in the middle, and maybe they've gone on too long now, but I quite enjoyed it. They're doing a third Bad Boys movie. How's that? Or a fourth Bad Boys movie?
I knew about that, actually. I watched a trailer for it. I didn't watch Bad Boys 2.
Oh, I liked Bad Boys 2. But Bad Boys
It does
3,
make me think.
I didn't really watch. And then obviously this will be the fourth instalment. So 1 and 2 I quite enjoyed. And that's why I fell off it, I think. It was good at the time. Everybody wanted a black Porsche 911 from the first one because it did look amazing.
It makes me think of Hot Fuzz. You haven't seen Bad Boys 2?
Yeah, that is a fair point. You haven't seen Bad Boys 2? I hope you've seen
Bad Boys 2.
Point Break, though, because that's the other film they reference.
Well, Point Break is an absolute classic. I have seen Bad Boys 1, but Point Break is a better film.
100%. Point Break. Fantastic film.
Great film. And
I'm looking forward to when I can introduce my children to these sorts of films, because I think there's some classic films. I nearly got them hooked on Trying Speed, because you have to sell it to them at their age. And I'm like, just try it out. This bus can't go below 50 miles an hour. It's such, it's a nice, easy concept for them. The film's quite family friendly, I think. I like the way you're searching deep in your head. But I was just so frustrated that they didn't want to watch it, because I'm trying to introduce them to newer movies. Well,
we went through a early 90s patch and watched Speed and Point Break. Point Break is not family friendly. Don't watch. It suddenly turns into shooting and killing very quickly.
But they need to be a bit older for that one.
My daughters absolutely love Point Break.
It's such a good film. It's just such a good film. It's fantastic. Brilliant.
Did they remake it recently? I feel like they did.
They did remake it, and why would you remake a classic? Because you're never going to succeed, and they made it so bad. I've seen bits of it. It's awful. Don't even want to talk about it.
Okay, I'm moving on. They remade RoboCop 2.
And they've tried to rehash Terminator a few times.
Yeah, let's move on. Should we talk about some games?
Some games. I'm bad on the games front. I've not played anything different. I get into a game and then I don't leave it for a while, so I apologise up front.
This is fine. I'm just going to very quickly talk about one. We talked on Monday about a new PlayStation emulator that had come to iOS. Giant, I forget what it was called, but
it was called Gamma.
In Gamma, that's what I've got the big G on my iPhone. That's why I was thinking Giant Gamma. But RetroArch is an interesting one to have come to to iOS and apparently tvOS as well. RetroArch is an emulator that contains multiple emulators. So if you go and you look at it, it has cores for almost everything, including the PlayStation, including the Commodore 64, and all sorts of things like that. So I have fiddled with RetroArch on Raspberry Pis and things. I've got a vague idea how it works, although it's incredibly complicated. If you're at all put off by a very obscure user interface, don't put RetroArch on your phone. But it actually does work, and I managed to have a Commodore 64 game up and running on it in about 3 minutes, I think. I had a quick round of Whizball earlier because I happened to have the ROM for Whizball kicking around. It really just works very, very, very well, and it's amazing to be sat on your iPhone playing a Commodore 64 game. It will do arcade machine emulation, it will do Nintendo emulation, and all these kinds of things as well. And I think that's interesting, but actually bringing it to Apple TV Plus, that could be a game changer. So I need to look into that a little bit more when I find a bit of time. Not this week or next week, but maybe the week after.
That is a masterstroke, isn't it? Apple TV, like being able to play games on the big tele. That would be pretty cool. How they're going to look on a big 60-odd inch OLED, though, is another question. But I think it's a brilliant idea, by the way. As soon as I saw TV, I was like, yes. I just want the platforms to do some form of ROM store. Can I just go and buy a bunch of ROMs? Please.
I think it's complicated for reasons we've talked about before to who owns the rights to some of these.
No, I do get that. That is a problem, but I think it could be awesome.
Yeah, this is one for the viewers more than anything else. You can see that's a Commodore 64 game running.
Does look quite cool though.
On my iPhone, there you go. And just to prove that it works, there's the little Whizball bouncing up and down on the screen. So
it looks of a time, doesn't it?
But just to your point, this is a pixel. What's the resolution of an iPhone screen? Pretty goddamn high.
Yeah,
looks alright, doesn't it?
Millions of pixels.
Yeah, it looks alright. So I think to answer your thing, it's going to go okay in a 4K screen as long as you can upscale it to that sort of thing.
Yeah, it is cool. I'm super keen to try the tvOS emulator. For me, that sounds more interesting. Grab a spare gamepad, off you go.
RetroArch is hard though. I can't oversell this enough. It's hard. Moving on for things that aren't hard for games companies because they love this kind of stuff, but I think is just dreadful. Electronic Arts are thinking about inserting adverts into games, but apparently they're going to do it thoughtfully, so it'll be okay.
If ever there was a company I do not trust to do anything thoughtfully, it's Electronic Arts. I'm sorry, they've just not got a good track record. And I get everybody's trying to monetize everything with adverts, but I'm not happy about it.
I remember companies talking about this years ago, that if you bought a Formula One game or a football game where there would be advertising hoardings in the game, which, we see these at football matches and races all the time, particularly for energy drinks and things like that when it comes to racing, that they would dynamically change over the years. So if you raced next season, you'd have different, and that, I guess for a game like that kind of makes sense, or some sort of esports thing you could put them in. But I absolutely do not want adverts inserted into something I spent 70 quid on. Would you like your Command & Conquer remastered to suddenly start trying to sell you Diet Coke or something? I don't think so.
No, I love that game. That would really annoy me. I just worry EA have not got good form. But let's wait and see. I can just imagine my son, though, playing, I was going to say FIFA, but FC24. I'm going, Dad, there's adverts. Why are there adverts? How do we get rid of the adverts? So hopefully we'll be tasteful with it, but who knows?
What's tasteful? I mean, if gun manufacturers start sponsoring Call of Duty, that's not tasteful.
No, agreed. But I more meant about the implementation irrelative of the content. But you're right. There's two sides here, isn't there? There's the implementation detail and then who they're allowed to participate. So maybe you'll have Trump trying to canvass everybody to vote for him through COD.
That's a horrifying future I don't want to think about. Let's talk about one more games-related item before we move on. With the 17.5 release of iOS, which we've talked about a couple of times now, there was some new features, including a Pride wallpaper and cross-platform tracking. We've talked about that, but there was a new feature within Apple News Plus that had games within it, including one called Quartiles or Quantiles. Quartiles. I can't get this in the UK. Have you tried?
I hadn't tried, but it does seem to be a thing companies are doing. So I subscribe to the iNewspaper. I get the digital version every day in the week, and then I get the physical one at the weekend. And they've started doing some of their games digitally, but they don't do all of them. So what I do on my iPad is occasionally I go print and then just open it up as a screen grab and draw on it with the pencil, so I can do some of the games. Because there's a couple of games I enjoy that they haven't digitized, so it does seem to be a thing. Where do I go to do games?
Apparently, you go into the news app and then you click on search, and it should be there somewhere, but I can't find it in the Apple UK version of the app. So nowhere have I found that it says this is for US customers only. So I expect I should be able to find it, but I'm not terribly impressed because I quite like the odd little of a word game. I still play Knotwords religiously every day. I was delighted actually when I came back to iOS after being on Android that it let me regain my streaks. So I've got my 467-day streak still going of Knotwords, but I can't find this in the News Plus app. So that could be your mission for this week: is can you find Quartiles?
Just below the top story section, you'll see latest puzzles. That's what it says. I've got a top story section.
So here we are.
This is rubbish podcasting, by the way.
It's rubbish podcasting, but it makes
top
the point.
stories. So it's the bit on the homepage.
Yeah.
And I've got no puzzles, so I don't think it's an international puzzle.
Well, why put this in the release then? That's not fair.
Agreed. They should have said which country, surely.
Yeah. We can't have Vision Pros and we can't have puzzles, even though we pay the same subscription as everybody else.
How's your Apple credit card?
Yeah, exactly. We're kind of being let down, aren't we, in the UK?
Yeah, I think so. They've really struggled with the credit card, though, to go anywhere with it. It's been out a long time, just not here.
I think it's a bit of a... What's the expression? A stone round the neck? What is it? I can't remember what it goes with. Stone for the back? Something like that. You think
like ball and chain or something?
Yeah, something like that. Something about millstones, but something that holds them back that is a problem, because we've had those stories about them struggling to find banks to take it over and all the rest of it. Maybe just no UK bank would touch it.
Potentially, yeah. Who knows? Or they need a big international partner. Maybe I don't know. It's got localized subsidiaries.
There we go. That was it for games. Should we do a main show?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's turn to the main show. So I was going to start, if that's all right, with a brief tour of my iPad that I've purchased this week and some accessories. So what have I done? I went and bought, as I think I've said on the podcast, I bought the 11-inch iPad Pro in, what do we call this colour? Dark grey?
Grey. Space grey.
So it's in space grey, which I kind of wanted the lighter one because I quite like the silver products they do. I had the silver one before and I think it looks very nice. But I went for the black one because I thought I'm not getting the white keyboard. So I bought the black one. Looks fantastic. It is a lovely device. I'm just trying to turn it around. It's got the screen, beautiful. This webcam isn't doing it justice, but the screen is beautiful on it. The one thing that struck me a little bit as I was looking at it today is the bezels feel a bit chunky on it, if I'm honest, because I'm so used to my iPhone where it goes to the edge, whereas actually the black bezels around the outside do look a little thick for an 11-inch one. I don't know how much I need those thicker bezels now. So that's the one thing that I thought, they could have done something there, because they've done it on everything else. But the rest of it, fantastic. And look, if you've owned an iPad, there's not much to really talk about. It is super light. It's super fast. It looks beautiful. I've got lots of storage in it. I've got the cellular one, which caused me a slight problem because I'm trying to get a SIM card converted to eSIM, which didn't just work automatically. So hopefully I'm going to get that resolved tomorrow. So I'm very happy with that. For me, it's a change because I've gone from the 13-inch to the 11-inch, which I wanted to do because this is the first time I've bought one when we've got the ability to use a second screen, whereas the last one I bought, I had to get the bigger one because it had a higher resolution and you could only mirror your screen, whereas now I can extend. So I don't need the main device to be a higher resolution. I got it with the Apple Pencil, which is just like the old Apple Pencil. You wouldn't know if it didn't say the word Pro at the top end of it. It's nice. It is what it is. It sticks on the top. It's a bit loose when you stick it on. It's already fallen off a couple of times. So it doesn't feel as strong as it used to be, which at £130 in the UK, you don't want that flying off anywhere. I've also bought the keyboard. So I've really gone for it. I did debate at some length with you whether I would even open the keyboard because it is quite heavy. But actually, it feels really good. The aluminium on the top, it works really well. It's not a diving board trackpad anymore. So the previous one was a diving board where you click part of it, move, whereas this one is perfectly flat when you click it. It's just like the one on your MacBook. Having the function is brilliant. I can adjust the volume, which is nice. I've got an escape key. Imagine that. I can lock it as well from the keyboard, which obviously that works now is good. A bit unsure getting the 11-inch one about the keyboard, but actually I think the keys are okay. Obviously, there's a few of them that are a little bit squished, but actually I think they've made the right compromises, like the keys between the return key and the letters. They're all a little bit smaller, and the shift key, the tab, and the caps lock key, they're a little bit smaller, but actually I think that works. So really pleased with the case. I think it's fantastic, and it's got the extra port on it. One thing to know now is it's got a faster charging port, whereas the previous gen had a slow charging port. So the hardware fantastic, but it does feel very samey to what I've had before. That's probably the one thing. Like if you've had an iPad, this isn't much different. You know, sometimes like when we bought the MacBook Pros from the M1 onwards, they actually felt new and different because they had the black keyboards, they had different ports, they had screens with the notches on. You know, it felt like you were getting a really new product, whereas this feels very similar. That's probably the one thing I would say. The pencil's nice. The squeeze function to bring up the little tool thing, actually pretty cool. I don't get why they couldn't have done that before though. If I double tap before, why couldn't you just show me the palette as they called it before? So I think they have locked that into the pencil and they could make that available to more as just an option. So I think they've done a good job there. Haptics, yeah, they're fantastic. The hover over as well. I know that was on the previous M2 iPads, but I never had one. So being able to hover over icons or hover when you draw, it's a bit weird to begin with because like, oh, why is that white line following me around, or the white dot of your pencil? But actually fantastic. So I think they've done a really good job with it all. So I'm happy with it, but I think for most people, they'll be like, oh, it's just like my last one. I was actually waiting. As I've said, I think my iPad was getting a little slow when I've got 8 windows open. Yeah, I've got 4 on one screen, 4 on another. On when the Teams call, it was slowing down. So I'm happy I've made the purchase. It was a lot of money. Let's not lie about that. And it's definitely not for everybody. Most people should go and get themselves an Air because that will do 99% of what you want. Yeah, so fantastic. The OLED screen is beautiful. And you haven't got the blooming that you had on the mini LED. The mini LED screen was equally beautiful. Part of me regretted not getting the 13-inch one because sometimes with the screen light, you kind of want it to be a bit bigger. But equally, I was really going for the portability and super chuffed with that. It now can sit underneath my monitor, which is great because the 13-inch would encroach upon the monitor. So, yeah, very happy with that. So, yeah, I'm very pleased. The bit that's been obviously in the news this week is iPadOS still isn't any different, which I'm comfortable with. I'm hoping there's going to be some changes coming, but equally, I've bought this more to keep it for a few years because hopefully it's so well spec'd, as I have been some previous iPads, they've been more spec'd than the OS will drive. And therefore, hopefully it's going to see me out another 2 to 3 years. So that's why I've gone big this time. So I buy it once and not in a year's time go, oh, I wish I bought one with a bit more storage or cellular. I've got everything I want.
That's good. I mean, it does exactly what you wanted to, which is what you bought it for, which is it gives you a little bit more speed, a little bit more flexibility, a lot more portability. You have a few more features in the pencil and things like that. It sounds like you weren't expecting big software changes for this because we kind of knew that was going to happen. So, I mean, great product for somebody who absolutely relies on using the hell out of their iPad Pro. Then you're doing that. What you said there about most people don't need this. I don't think you could get away with an Air, possibly even a standard iPad for most functions. If what you do is surf the web, write the odd email, want to run an app or something like that, actually the bog standard iPad is probably going to be good enough for you. For me, listening to you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if you've bought an M1 or an M2 iPad Air Pro, you probably don't need to upgrade to this just yet.
No, unless you really want the screen, or you are doing exporting or something where you're really crunching the numbers, which I'm not doing. I'm not doing the exporting. But no, I think if you've got an M2, it's possibly not worth it. I mean, I've gone from the M1, so that's 3 processor generations behind. But no, most people, the M1's fine. I just don't think most people are getting out of it. How many people actually know they can plug a second screen in and do all of that? Very few, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to naturally distort with the software a little bit, because I think, again, everything you've said, and it's perfect for you, Chris, and it'll come over as me criticising, right, and being down on iPads again, and I'm trying not to be. But even hardcore iPad users say there's sort of there's a problem when it comes to the apps in the iPads, and what's often highlighted is there's apps missing from the iPad, like a calculator is the one that's often cited. And it's not about the fact there isn't a calculator app. You can download lots of calculator apps. It's that Apple aren't giving it the attention that it deserves to maximize it. And I'm not saying you have to put macOS on there. They should make iPadOS better. So my own personal example of this is, and it goes back to the emulation thing we were talking about. I thought I'd try and get RetroArch running on my iPad. I went into the Files app on my iPad, which is not a great app, but it gives you some functionality. I connected to my NAS, great. That's a thing I never used to be able to do many moons ago, is it would just what was on there and a little bit of iCloud. So great, it's got an SMB mount, so I mounted that. I navigated to the folder and I tapped on it, and it gave me no feedback as to what it was doing. Was it loading it? Was it giving me some sort of progress bar? No, it just sat there doing nothing. I couldn't click on anything else. I could swipe up and get rid of the Files app. But just give me a little indicator that you're doing something. Something as simple as that. Grow up and give me a better app. I understand you're not going to give me macOS, but it should be functional enough that I'm able to have something like that. Give me a terminal maybe, but just focusing on what's there. Why is the Files app so bad? Why it's the canary in the coal mine. That's what I was thinking of, trying to think of the expression I was trying to think of before. It's that again, really. It's not finished. That's my feeling.
No, and I actually quite like the Files app in many ways. But you're right, there's just no indication when you're connecting to network shares and stuff. I think there's some smart stuff it does, like it can hook into your OneDrive, your Dropbox through the plugin architecture. But the OS does need some investment, and I think that's where Apple are struggling. I had hoped maybe with Vision OS being a fork of iPad that actually it may get more love over the years, but I wonder whether Vision OS will diverge more from it, because the iPad hasn't really diverged from the iPhone, even though they've changed the name, but that's more of a name than it is a true split, which I think we're all expecting more of a split, and that hasn't really happened.
Yeah, let us plug in our iPhones and do multi-screen in the same way Samsung DeX does, because like you say, it's really not that different. If I've got an iPhone Pro, you should give me the same functionality you've got. Let me plug in a keyboard, let me plug in a USB hub, let me use some of these apps in iPad mode. There's so many things, and you could go from the device you wanted up to the one. But I'm getting off track. I think it's good. It's too expensive, but most people shouldn't buy it. Most people should buy an Air and restrain themselves, unless you have to have that screen or you need every erg of power because you're a video editor and you can't use a Mac for some reason. Then yeah, absolutely go for all the RAM and go for all the things, and maybe you want to do that multi-camera thing that they showed that was super cool. But yeah, I mean, I'm genuinely pleased for you, Chris, that it's the hardware on the device that you want, because you were hitting the bumps of what the last one could give you, and it's not like you sprung for an M2. And I slightly wonder if people with 2018 iPad Pros don't really need spring for this, although your battery's probably going at this point. But unless you've got a compelling reason to upgrade like that, it sounds like in the natural course of time, when the device you've got and you need that level of power, then do it. Don't jump on this.
No, I agree. I jump on this only if you want the screen or you want an old iPad that's not cutting the mustard anymore. And I think that's why some people upgrade. But if you're just watching films, browsing the net, you're not going to get a huge amount out of a faster chip, are you? So I'm happy, but it is very much niche, 100%.
One thing I am hoping from it is I've linked to Jason Snell's review of it, as well as the discussion that he had on Upgrade with Federico Viticci, who is a massive iPad fan of the Connected podcast, and MacStories.net, I think, is the website, to give them all the various credits, is how fast the M4 chip is, even compared to like an M3 MacBook Pro. So in multi-core performance, a 13-inch iPad Pro with the M4 scores 14,595, whereas an M3 MacBook Air scores 11,936. It's a powerhouse. It makes me really hopeful for what the M4s are going to be like when they hit the Mac.
Oh yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I don't think it's in this article, but I saw one where it's like the same speed as an M2 Max or something. So the Apple have been really good at pushing the power down to the cheaper chips, and continue to drive it forward. So it is, and I'm hoping maybe like I say, maybe it will help me for years to come to keep it and it still be relevant because it's so far ahead of the time. I did skip the M2, as we said, because there just wasn't a compelling reason for it, and this was my year, I think.
It's good, and it's taken me this long to realise that the sort of silver bars on the screen say Pro. On all the screenshots in the box, it's PRO, it's Pro.
It's a bit rubbish, though, isn't it?
It's not the greatest graphic they've ever done.
No.
Jason Snell's review is worth a watch. I haven't listened to Upgrade myself with Federico, but I believe it's a really good interview. I don't know if you've listened to Upgrade this week.
Yeah, so I have listened to it. They couldn't get Federico an iPad for some reason. They invited him to London, but didn't give him an iPad to review. So he really just focused on the OS not really changing, whereas Jason provided the review piece. It's worth a listen. It's really well done, I thought. And a lot of the iPad OS frustrations are the ones we all know about. It's not perfect, but yeah, for me it's better than using Windows, so that's why I've chosen my tools.
Yeah, it's interesting, and there's a lot of people hanging their hats waiting for WWDC. I wouldn't wait for WWDC. If you think you need this device, and for all the sort of provisos we've put onto this, if you need it, get it. It's not going to change dramatically with iPadOS. You've got to be happy with the device as it is now. Don't hang your hat on something else coming along. If you're happy with it as you're at the position Chris is, and you need it, go buy it. Other than that, hang on to what you've got and give it another year and see what happens.
Yep. I'm hoping there'll be some improvements with iPadOS 18, but I'm not expecting it to change my world. And you should never buy hardware expecting a software update to change your world, because it may never happen.
It may never happen. So on that, we've attached in the show notes the iPad decision flowchart for 2024 by Jared Newman, which we found on Mastodon. It's worth going through it. I think I followed my own path through it, and it said don't bother. So that fit with what my expectation would be, and I think it's quite a good one. There's also a similar one for should you get an Apple Pencil linked to in the same toot, or just under the toot if you follow the link in the show notes. So I think that's worth checking out if you are on the fence.
It's actually a very well done flowchart, to be fair.
It is.
It's quite
very
cool.
well done. Yeah, I wish I could draw flowcharts so well.
Mm-hmm. No, but it's very well done. I quickly did it. It was like, what screen do you want? Well, I want the small screen. Are you going to use it with a monitor? Yes. Oh, so I want a medium screen. Are you going to use it with a monitor? Buy the 11-inch iPad Pro. Done. Which is exactly what I did.
Nice. Shall we talk about some Google stuff just for a bit of contrast?
Yeah, so I'm a bit behind on the Google stuff, so I'm going to be looking to you to give me a flavour, but I'm guessing it's all AI.
It's all AI all the time. I tried to watch Google I.O., which was their live announcement, in the same way that Apple has its events. They have Google I.O. every year. I have watched a couple of them in the past. This is one of the least exciting ones I've ever seen. I actually got bored of it after about 40 minutes. I would say if you played a drinking game, where every time they said multimodal, not AI, not generative, but multimodal, you'd have been drunk after about the first 9 minutes because everything was multimodal. There is a terrible bit of music at the start of it. They had a very sort of 3D shape sort of theme that they stuck to, which was fine. But actually, the meat of these things is about the announcements. Sundar is a great CEO, I think. I don't think he's the greatest presenter in the world. You could say the same of Tim Cook. He knows to throw it to other people who might inject a bit of dynamism. Tim's got better over the years, as have the others. And they did that a little bit. And they do it in a similar way to Apple. It's not pre-recorded. They throw it to another announcer and then they bring it back. But the entire focus of it wasn't what's coming in Android, which would have been once upon a time. Although a lot of these features will come to Android, it was speaking about the features themselves as much as anything else. But everything was generative, multimodal AI, and all the features came back to that. So very quickly, Google's large language model is called Gemini. They have released it on the web for even non-paying Google users can get on there and use it, and it'll give you a slightly substandard ChatGPT-like experience. It's got the same sort of things. It can do coding. It can answer questions. It hallucinates the same way as all AIs do, and a little bit more on that later. So there was a bit of focus on Gemini and how fast it was and how the next generation Gemini 1.5 was going to be an awful lot better. And of course, they had a chart about how much better it was. There were some practical things in there, so better search for photos. You were able to be a bit more specific about what it was you wanted. So if you show me my daughter when she was swimming, it will find all the pictures of who it knows is your daughter and sort of sequence them in a line, or when she was wearing the swimming costume, or when she was in a competition or something like that. And it was able to sort of focus down on the photos based on that. That's just a clever search, really. But obviously, when you think about that, no, it's able to process what's in the images more than anything else. So that's an actual practical feature that might be useful.
That's quite
And then
cool.
you could save, and you could say show it as a timeline, and it would show her, from her first with water wings in the water right up to the point when she won a gold medal in the pool and stuff. And that was really quite an impressive tech demo, actually. And then you can save that as a slideshow, so you can send on to someone else. So things like that, which sort of have a practical output, I think were quite good. Being Google, they focused a bunch on how you could, spin up a chatbot to be able to deal with bits of your company and all the rest of it, sort of for work things. They went into a lot of detail about new models available within it, so you'd be able to have your own generative AI for your workspace based on Gemini, sort of as fundamental underpinnings. I sent you the link to this that was available on YouTube. It was about a 3-minute video from somebody picking up an Android smartphone and just walking around an office with it, asking it to do things. So show me a device in here that makes noise, and the camera goes past a speaker. And it goes, this is a speaker, and then she draws on the screen of what does this bit do? It's a tweeter, it makes these noises. And that was a really cool tech demo, I thought, just as an ability to process its environment based on a camera input and you walking around with it. I thought that was pretty cool.
That was a really cool demo. And then when I realised they were in London, I'd walked past that building just last week, and I was like, oh, I know exactly where they are. No, I thought it was a really good demo because it was very informal. It didn't feel like it was a canned demo per se. I don't know whether it was meant to be, but it was very cool. But super interesting how they're doing it. You're just moving your camera around and asking it questions. Very cool, and it seemed very quick.
Yeah, and it probably won't be, but for the purposes of this, and maybe the shorten the sequences, because we know the humane pen and the rocket thing that it takes ages to ask these things. But this is one of the things they were trying to demo is the 1.5 version of Gemini is so much faster than the others. There was a sneak peek, if you hadn't been paying attention, to a potential new Google Glass in here as well. At one point, she puts down her phone and picks up some glasses. There's a spot on it, so it knows what she's looking at. So maybe Google Glass is coming back as well with this stuff built in. Maybe it's now clever enough to do that. But yeah, a super cool demo, I thought.
Yeah, no, cool demo. It'll be interesting whether they do bring back Google Glass and Apple bring in Vision. So I don't know. Maybe the world will be a little bit calmer around Google Glass now, and maybe they do it in a better way.
Maybe. The next section featured on generative AI for things like audio and video and logo generation and things like that. Most of these sort of generative AI models, like Midjourney and others, which will draw pictures based on what you tell it, aren't good at text, for example. So if you're trying to get it to draw the alphabet made out of pictures of my cat, and it'll do an A, made up of your orange tabby cat or something like that, can't do words. They'd obviously made huge strides with the ability to do that. So I think there's a lot of creatives get a bit worried at that point when they start going, I don't need you to do my 90-second of pre-roll about how to visualize data or something like that. You can just tell one of these generative AIs to do it. And there were some very impressive demos with that. If you click on the article, the Wired article that's linked in the show notes, there's a good bit of video about 3 llamas wearing sweatshirts or polo necks and sunglasses, and the video quality of it is really impressive. There was a few demos like that, and I'm sure you'll agree that's quite impressive as well.
Do you think Apple's WWDC is going to be akin to this, where it's all AI stuff and not really the walkthrough of the OS that we normally get?
Well, I think A leads to B, doesn't it? The rumors are that Apple are talking to Google and talking to ChatGPT, OpenAI, about these things, and I suspect we'll see some of this within it. Which leads nicely, good question, onto the next part of what they were doing, which is how can you practically apply some of these things? And the demo for this was, there were two demos, one of which they got very badly wrong, and one of which went quite well. So the sort of canned demo on stage was, there was a turntable in front of the lady. She's trying to get the swing arm to sit on the record. She holds the phone up and says, "Why is the swing arm not staying in place?" It identifies the model of turntable. It identifies 4 or 5 problems with that particular model of turntable, and you can rectify the problem based on what the phone's saying. So it's doing sort of problem solving based on search, which is quite clever actually. They also showed an article. An instance where it downloaded the PDF manual for the device and gone straight to the section of the PDF where that particular problem was talked about. So again, that's quite cool.
That's quite cool.
The bit where they got it wrong is they tried to do the same with an old film camera. Why is the lever not being able to advance the film? And one of the recommendations was you pop open the back of the camera and you have a look. So if you're a film photographer, that's a big no-no.
Yeah, you don't let light onto the film, do you?
You do not want to let light onto the film. And that was sort of the highlights of what they went through. There was a bit of a section that is disturbing in the sense that basically Google is going to Google for you. So rather than you putting in a search and it coming up with results, it will actually use what you put into the search to go off and do all the work for you. So the example given was, plan me a trip to go to East Asia or something like that. I want to stay in this sort of hotel and I want this to happen. And it will do a whole itinerary based on it reaching out and pulling what Google knows about all those things and just putting it in place for you. And you could then modify it as part of the search. So the value for that for me is, wow, that's really cool. But if I was one of those travel websites or an Airbnb website or something like that, none of that data goes on, none of those hits for the search goes onto those. It's all staying within Google. So for Google, it's a cool demo. And it's you could see it being the next generation of the advertising company being able to centralize all that into themselves. But if I was a little domain holder out there somewhere, I'd be deeply nervous about that.
But surely places like bookingwebsite.com are going to go and do something very similar. They're going to have their own AI and go, right, book me plan me a trip all around South America and I want to see these countries and these landmarks.
But do you need to,
2 weeks and I've got this budget?
But do you need to, if all you need to say is go to Google and do it?
But then they're not going to have the hooks to actually place the order. Whereas, I don't know, it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. And are Google going to want to get into it? That's also the thing, isn't it? I think because Google are very good at getting into something and then leaving it. So,
as we've discussed on this, yeah.
But it's probably not their business, though, is it? It's probably more. It's probably more that they would go down this avenue and then realise it's not a business for them.
We will see. As you say, they're very good at dropping things. It makes for a cool demo, and most of the things they've shown at Google I/Os in the past, not that many of them make it through. And again, like Apple, some of them never make it to the UK. A couple of years back, they showed an amazing thing where you would phone a restaurant for you and book a table and be able to respond to the person on the other end, so you didn't have to. That never made it to the UK.
I don't know what that gets me, though. I guess if I'm really, really busy and I don't have a PA, it could just do it for me, but I don't find it that hard booking a table.
No, I know, but it's just an example of things that are fairly simple for an AI, for want of a better word, to be able to do. So, interesting. I told you about the factual error. I told you about the Google Glass. ChatGPT also released a new model this week. It's called 4o. It has emotion in it this time. There's a couple of really cool demos on YouTube if you want to go looking for them. I won't go into this much detail other than to say, of course, the model is better, things are faster, it can process quicker, and you can have about 15 free goes of it before they want to pay for it.
Okay, so that seems fair. Interesting they're releasing it at the same time as I/O, because to me it felt like Apple were trying to not do anything on Google I/O Day. They were trying to let Google have the day, and they didn't announce anything then, because actually the reviews of the iPads came out on the Monday, as did the software update, but Tuesday they didn't do anything, and then the actual iPads came out on Wednesday. Obviously ChatGPT want to make sure they're still top of the AI conversation. Do you reckon they're going to announce something on WWDC Day just so that they're in the news mix?
I think they beat them by a day, but still it's all a bit conflated, isn't it?
Yeah, there's still a lot of noise on AI. It is interesting. It is interesting. I wonder whether Apple are going to be playing catch up this year, or whether they're actually going to have some. They've waited a year, either because they hadn't done any work on this sort of thing and it caught them by surprise, or because they really wanted to fully bake stuff before they got it out there. So I'm going to be interested to see how they pitch it.
It will be an interesting WWDC, that's for sure. Shall we do an app of the week?
Let's do it.
So very simple this week. It's DaVinci Resolve 19 Beta. This is the new version of the video editor that I've used. I was using Final Cut Pro. I've stopped because it starts massively consuming hard disk space, it would seem. I'm probably doing something wrong with caching or something, but DaVinci doesn't. I'm very impressed with the app. It's very quick to get an edit up and running. Most of these things are the same, it must be said. If you've ever got any sort of interest in learning, though, the amount of stuff that is on YouTube that you can freely get to get you up and running very, very quickly with DaVinci is really impressive. If you click on the link in the show notes, it will take you to a sizzle reel of things that have been done with DaVinci Resolve. You'll notice most of the recent Marvel movies, for example, have been edited on DaVinci Resolve. It's a proper piece of software. You can pay 390 quid, I think, to update it to the professional version. DaVinci or Blackmagic, the company that make DaVinci, aren't really in the market for selling you software. They'll take it, but what they want you to do is buy their camera, buy their mixing desk, buy their hard disks that are fast enough to deal with this kind of stuff. So it's just a really, really solid app. Works on Windows, Linux, Mac. It's a bit harder to install on Linux, as I've discovered, but I'm back on my Mac using it, and I'm really impressed with 19. It's very, very solid beta.
It does look cool. If you scroll down below the sizzle reel, it's got like a studio where you've got people editing the audio and the video by the looks of it, and then some comfy seats for, I guess, like the director to watch. Or it just looks an amazing studio. I want that. Can I have that, please? No, it looks good, and I had no idea that it was used for like Marvel films and things like that. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's really good. If you get bored and you want just 10 minutes on stuff, you can do things like, as non-video editors, and I don't have to do it for editing this podcast or some of the other things I do, but putting text behind mountains and stuff like that, how you can do that and how simply you can do that. It's a really cool product, and most of these things you can do with Final Cut Pro also, not knocking Final Cut Pro, but for a free, in inverted commas, piece of software, this is hugely functional and more than most people will ever do. And you can use 90% of the product for the free part of it. For example, you can edit in 4K and things like that. So many other video editors want you to pay a premium for sort of hitting some of those professional features. I think it's really good of Blackmagic to do this. So yeah, it's an impressive piece of software.
100%. You don't get much for free in this day and age, so fair play to them.
In that fact, thing of the week.
So thing of the week, I nearly went with my iPad, but I've only had it about a day. And I've used it all day today, but I thought that wasn't right. So I've actually gone with The Killer comic, which I have read on my new iPad. So do you remember The Killer movie that came out on Netflix? It's done by David Fincher of Panic Room, Fight Club, Seven, etc. films. So I really enjoyed the movie, and I knew it was based on a comic. So I bought the comic a while ago on my Kindle. But actually it doesn't render very well on my little Kindle. You kind of need something a little bit bigger. And actually, to be fair to Amazon and the Kindle app on the iPad, worked really well. So I've been reading it on there. And with my nice OLED screen, it gave me a good excuse. Which is part of the reason I went for the smaller iPad. Is I just found the other one a bit big to hold when you do want to read a newspaper or a magazine. So that's why I've gone for the 11-inch as well. Another reason. But anyway, The Killer comic is actually pretty good, and I really enjoyed it. And I wanted to see how it compared to the film. So that was my recommendation. I was trying to go for something a bit different this week.
767 pages.
It's a comic, though, isn't it? I mean, it's not like there's a lot of words per page.
I thought we called them graphic novels these days.
Oh, okay, graphic novels. It's not like it's Robert Galbraith. I don't know if you ever read J.K. Rowling books, but she was writing as Robert Galbraith. They are equally that kind of long, and there's a lot more words per page than this. So I'm comfortable with that. And it's broken down into different chapters, so you don't have to read it all the way through. I've just done chapter 1 last night. I just thought it was really nice, and like I said, I love the film.
I was more getting at its value for money than anything else. It's
okay.
Not like you're getting a 13-page comic.
True, yeah, that's fair. It is good value. I don't even know how much it costs. It's £16 here in the UK.
There you go. I think we can call that a show, Chris.
Yeah, no, it's really good. So if anybody wants to get in contact with us, Rod is at g5maniac@mastodon.scot. I'm at _CJP at mastodon.social. You can watch it on YouTube by going to our website, wakefromsleep.com, and clicking on the YouTube link. Or you can drop us an email at wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.